Hello, welcome to this edition of the news. My name is Sarah Shinhori. As we begin, we'll start with the headlines. President Paul Kagame has participated in the 2023 Colombia Global Energy Summit in New York City. Prime Minister Dr. Edouard Ngirente has presided over the swearing-in ceremony of 4 prosecutors. Genocide survivors in Rwanda's southern province have been recounting how the murderous government instilled during the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi intensified the atrocities in that part of the country when it moved there on the 12th of April in that year. Thank you again for taking the time to join us, and now the details. Good governance and having a stable vision are noted to be key points that helped Rwanda to solve the problem of energy production that many African countries unfortunately are still facing today. This was reiterated by the President of the Republic, His Excellency Paul Kagame, on Wednesday at the Colombia Energy Global Summit.
It all requires good governance. It requires the rule of law. It requires planning in real sense. Planning will come into every aspect of our life. If you look at even the energy transition part, it requires a lot of planning. There are so many things that depend on many factors that are not under one's control. So what we do, we focus on planning and planning with others. We look at the whole, as I said earlier, the region. We plan in the region, we integrate visions, if you will, and where do we want to go? Where does each one country want to go? And in our part, we have focused on building these strong institutions, making sure that the governance aspects of it looked into carefully. And I think we are predictable. We have created a predictable environment. When you come to Rwanda, you know what to expect. We have a conversation. You can trust that what we are saying, we are talking about is what is going to happen. I think this is very key for sustainable success of any country, or even if it is just any organization. I think there has to be that sense of being trusted that what your word is going to be translated into deeds. I guess that's what every part of the partnership is expecting.
Regarding renewable energy, both in Africa and particularly in Rwanda, President Kagame noted that the discussion of that topic is difficult since there are still a large number of Africans who don't access electricity.
It's a sort of complicated discussion. Africa, as you said, the majority of the Africans don't have access to electricity. And it is very clear that for us to grow, to see growth, to realize middle income or high income status, without electricity access is just not possible. Anyone would be deceiving to say there is another channel. So that's number one. And the biggest part you find, they were telling me, is about 60% of Africa's population don't have access to electricity. Well, that's a big problem. but at the same time, it's a big opportunity in terms of if we made the right investments, again, based on the proper planning that has to happen, I think we can be able to create a very big market, whether it is the energy market for the industry, for people investing, but also give an opportunity for this big population to keep growing. That is the conversation that goes on. And how do we transition then? You have to even put into account transitioning from what? So you're already transitioning from this very low base on electricity access, and then to just leapfrog and arrive at clean energy, as the whole talk is about across the world, which is a good thing. So first, we need energy. And then from there, we can talk about what type and how. If we can have access to green energy, definitely this would be the best, but how do you get there realistically? So that's why I think there is talk of transition.
His Excellency Paul Kagame speaking at the 2023 Colombia Global Energy Summit in New York on Wednesday. Now, also on Wednesday, the Prime Minister of Rwanda, Dr. Edouard Ngirente, presided over the swearing-in of 4 prosecutors, including Dr. Diogene Bideri, a prosecutor at the national level. The prosecutors were all urged to respect citizens' rights. Prince Manzi has the details.
These prosecutors commend the government of Rwanda's equality in delivering justice, and they are ready to fulfill their responsibilities.
We commend the government of Rwanda for supporting women in all levels, and in our new assignments, at the forefront is providing justice with the aim of avoiding bad habits.
Not using powers bestowed in us for personal interests, that is the first assignment. There are gaps that might prompt us into this crime, but the advices and the Constitution prevent us from doing so. The Prosecutor General, Aimable Havugiyaremye, requested these prosecutors to work accurately. And their responsibilities include prosecuting, but there is also vindicating when the facts are not enough. In their work, they have to be accurate and careful to prevent sentencing someone, yet no evidence. Referring to their oath, Prime Minister Dr. Edouard Ngirente reiterated that no one is to use powers conferred upon them for personal interests. We also expect you to respect human rights and fight what is important for Rwandans. Consider also working hard and not using powers conferred upon you for personal interests. This is what we always find in some of the prosecutors, where you find some fall into corruption crimes, prosecuting wrongly, taking sides. We want you to be bold and good prosecutors. Citizens were also asked to report any incidents of corruption involving prosecutors that may become evident because there are measures in place to deal with them. Prince Manzi, RwandaTV News.
Now to ongoing commemoration activities here in the country. Survivors of the genocide against the Tutsi in the southern province have stressed that when the murderous government fled there on the 11th of April in 1994, it immediately stepped up efforts to kill the Tutsi in those parts of the country. Adam Squizera has the details.
The death of the former president of Rwanda, Juvenal Habyarimana, on 6 April 1994. Only 3 days later, On 9th April, the murderous government was established and Theodore Sindikubwabo became the president of the republic, while John Kambanda became the prime minister. They were all from the southern part of the country. A veteran politician, Luchagu Boniface, explains the reason behind the dominance of southern politicians in this government.
Ugarijwe n'intambara rero n'urugamba rwa FPR Inkotanyi nta handi.
They were attacked by RPF Inkotanyi. They chose nowhere else except in Nduga, hence to also influence their fellow people in Nduga to start practicing genocide by killing the Tutsi. That was my view as a person who was following that situation. The transfer of their operations to the former Gitarama prefecture was another sign of their defeat. At 11 a.m., people saw cars full of soldiers heading to Murambi at Tiriam Institute. They passed me here. It was afternoon, and we saw 2 military tanks entering those gates. We weren't allowed to enter there, as even their leaders fled after. Like 4, we woke up and found all those military tanks. Meanwhile, it was not something usual here. Some of the survivors in this area say that on the days following April 11th and 12th, when this government arrived in Gitarama, various roadblocks were set up in the former Nyamabuye municipality, and meetings were held with the representatives of the municipalities. There were plans to kill Tutsi in the southern parts. Later, Inkotanyi expelled this government and it fled to Gisenyi and later closed over the border into former Zaire. The bad ideas of the ethnicism and regionalism of the members of this murderous government and others who preceded them led to the genocide against the Tutsi and killed more than 600 Tutsi in the former prefectures of Gitarama, Butare, and Gikongoro. Adam Squizera, RTV News.
Employees of the Rwanda Revenue Authority, the National Electoral Commission, and the Office of the Auditor General have commemorated the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. After recapping on its history, they committed to fight against the genocide and its ideologies. Prince Manzi with more.
Employees had an opportunity to understand testimonies and discussions that tackled on the role of the army and public servants in the genocide against the Tutsi. Most of them, but also there were many who were not willing to kill, but because they know him for talking to the Tutsi, they would force him in some way and he would join in killing. Participants of these discussions say that lessons learned from the genocide against the Tutsi prompt them to work efficiently, patriotism and the future with no genocide.
Like we who use social media, we have to speak or write things that contribute to the society's development and also use social media in fighting against the genocide denial.
The administrations of these institutions say that discussions like these help employees to preserve unity among Rwandans and also confronting the survivors of the genocide against the Tutsi. Prince Manzi, RwandaTV News.
The Ministry of National Unity and Civic Engagement has urged countries around the world to increase their efforts in programs aimed at preserving the history of the genocide against the Tutsi. This was reiterated during the commemoration of UN employees who died during the genocide against the Tutsi back in 1994. Adam Squizera with more.
The employees of the UN agencies in Rwanda gathered together for the 29th commemoration of the genocide against Tutsi. It's an event which was attended by various institutions, including representatives of the families of the UN staff who were killed during the genocide against Tutsi.
This event makes us happy because it shows us that the United Nations respects our people who worked for it and admits that they were killed during the genocide against the Tutsi, as we also urge them to provide justice to us by prosecuting the perpetrators, including those who are still working for it.
The United Nations resident coordinator in Rwanda, Ozonia Ogielo, comforted those who lost their people during the genocide against Tutsi and appreciated the efforts of Rwandan government to strengthen the unity and reconciliation among Rwandans.
There was a cry for justice. So despite the failures of the international community through the UN set up the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. and worked across the world together with the government of Rwanda to identify genocide perpetrators, those who were the ringleaders in the terrible violence that happened during the genocide, and to bring them to justice. But the UN also then worked with the government of Rwanda in building a reconciled society.
Minister of National Unity and Civic Engagement, Dr. Bizimana Jean Damascene, urged the international communities to support Rwanda, especially in programs aimed at preserving the history of the genocide against Tutsi.
U Rwanda rufite umushinga wo kwandikisha inzibutso zimwe mu murage w'isi wa UNESCO. Inzibutso za Nyamata.
Rwanda has a project to register monuments in the World Heritage UNESCO. The monuments of Nyamata, Bisesero, Murambi, and Gisozi. As we urge other countries to support that project, once they will be registered in the World Heritage, it will help people to know the history of genocide against Tutsi, as it will be taught to the world, so that the youth of today will take lessons from that history in order that there will be no genocide elsewhere. Because what we want is to promote peace and security in the world.
Ubuzima burindwa, hakabaho amahoro ku isi.
It's an event attended by various institutions, including countries' representatives in Rwanda, representatives of the Ministry of National Unity and Civic Engagement, the Ibuka, and the representatives of the families of the former UN staff who were killed during genocide against Tutsi. Adam Squizera, RwandaTV News.
On Wednesday, employers and employees of various investment companies in Rwanda commemorated for the 29th time the genocide that was perpetrated against the Tutsi in 1994. They noted that commemorating serves the purpose of preserving that history and also contributes to building the country. Olive Nete with the details.
The ceremony, which brought together employees and employers from 7 investment companies, was opened by laying wreaths and paying tribute to the victims of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, buried in the Kigali Genocide Memorial. Senyumva Francois, a survivor and an employee of the RwandaTV, said that Tutsi were mistreated and persecuted even before the genocide started. During the genocide, his parents and 2 of his siblings were killed.
Ntago byagarukiye aho ngaho, hari ikindi nibuka mu gihe nari ndi muri icyo kiruhuko.
It didn't stop from there. While I was in vacation, there was a minister who was in the cabinet of the former president, Habyarimana. He lived at Masaka. He was a neighbor to our families. He had a water tap, and since not everyone had access to water, we would have to go fetch water, but Tutsi are not allowed to fetch water from his water tap. When we needed clean water, we'd go at another place far from home.
The commemoration ceremony was also composed of various dialogues which reiterated on the history and also on the role of everyone in preserving achievements made. Some of the employees of these investment companies reiterate on the role of such activities.
As we keep on commemorating, it assists us to know the negative effects of genocide, and also it gives us the strength to fight anything that would lead to it again.
Ambassador John Mirenge, who represented the 7 investment companies, pointed out that it is valuable that the majority of the employees of these companies are the youth, stressing the importance of these activities as an opportunity to teach them about the history of the country, but also by reminding them their role in the development of the country.
Through this commemoration, we get the source of strength, the strength to strive for the development of our country and strive to protect our Rwanda and make sure that what happened never happens again.
According to Ambassador Joseph Nsengimana, commemorating is a lifetime thing, and he also emphasized on the role of good leadership in building a united Rwanda without discriminations.
A ceremony like this of commemorating reminds us the fact that RPF Inkotanyi stopped the genocide, and he did this for the better good of Rwandans. Rwandans without discrimination. That's what RPF Inkotanyi fought for, even if it achieved it hardly. But by reaching that goal, all survivors and even all Rwandans understood how good leadership fights for the benefits of the citizens.
The investment companies, which united for the 29th commemoration of the genocide perpetrated against the Tutsi, include RwandaTV, Petrocom, SP Ltd, SP Aviation, Integrated Infrastructures Company, Prime Insurance, and Prime Life Insurance. Olive Nete, RwandaTV News.
Survivors of the genocide against the Tutsi in Remera and Kachiru here in Kigali say that before and during the genocide, they lived as if they had no country and no hope of surviving, but that they now appreciate the security and development in the country, as well as their Rwandan identity that does not promote divisionism. Prince Manzi with the details.
In Remera, Kigali City, survivors say that there was a hard situation in 1994 during the genocide against the Tutsi as they fled to Christus Center. After killing Nando, they came here removing people from rooms, and they collectively placed them at the door of the Christus parish, and they found that they won't eliminate them at the church and put them down there. This is also emphasized by survivors in the Kachiru sector, who state that even though there resided various officials, these same leaders promoted hate among citizens. Here was a lot of officials in the government, and they planned to eliminate the Tutsi, and they distributed easily weapons to the citizens. Here most of the citizens used guns, as here was a military camp. These survivors said that despite of the hard times they went through, they were able to develop themselves and reiterate that the perpetrators have to demonstrate where the bodies of some of the victims are.
Ukurikije uko Kacyiru muri jenoside yari imeze nuko ubu ngubu imeze nukuri nijuru.
Comparing Kachiru before and after the genocide, these are two different cities. We have a nation, we developed ourselves, we gave birth, we developed highly.
Twarabyaye, ubu twarize, mbese ubu twariyubatse bikomeye.
One thing that saddens us is that there are still bodies of our beloved who were massacred in the genocide, which are not yet buried. These survivors of the genocide against the Tutsi urge the youth to understand the value of love and peace and learn from the heroism of the RPF in Otanyi.
That brings us to the end of this edition of the news. Thank you for taking the time to join us as always. Goodbye.